So, General Clark, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jamie. It's a real honor to be here.
So, you have worked with the American College of National Security Leaders All Volunteer Force Analysis Project and even visited with the National Security Council about the problems that we're currently having recruiting. So, our All Volunteer Force is over 50 years old now. You remember the problems coming out of Vietnam. How bad is this problem now, the challenge that we face? And what do you see as the way ahead for us at recruiting and our force composition and structure?
Well, I think the Army and the other services have done a brilliant job, really, of making the all-volunteer force work. I started with it in 1971 as a captain, and my job was to find educational incentives to bring people in. So we did the first set of servicemen's opportunity colleges. And believe it or not, at that time, people would be on base and they'd take a course and then they go to the next base. And the college that was near the next base would say, well, we don't know that institution. We won't give you credit for the course you took. So we worked all that, and it was one of a package of incentives. Of course, the Armed Forces test was misnormed for several years in the 1970s. We thought we were bringing in what were known as Cat 3Bs, who were 90 to 100 on a IQ test or something. But the point is they weren't. And so we went through a real period where we had to produce comic books for manuals. But we got past that, at least in the Army, and I'm sure the other services too. And by the 1980s, we were bringing in some really top quality people into the enlisted force, as well as the officer corps. Of course, we went down in structure after the end of the Cold War. And this was the peace dividend. The Army, the service I was in, shrunk from the 780 numbers down to 535, and it's been squeezed ever since, even during the period of being involved in Iraq and in Afghanistan. We brought in augmentation, but we never got up to what we had, let's say, in the pre-Cold War period of Vietnam or during the Cold War when we had 780,000. So somehow we could do it then, and with a smaller population. But today we can't seem to do it as easily. Why is that? And what are the consequences? So we've got a good economy, unemployment's low, but really the national security requirements have just sort of faded out from American consciousness. 80% of the people, I'm told, that we're bringing into the services have a service connection. Most young Americans don't feel an obligation to serve, and they don't have a family connection to service. To them, it's a distant sort of, hey, is it like Star Wars? I'm glad somebody else is doing it. I can't give up my freedom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a really tough problem for the recruiters. And how have we responded? Well, the Navy's responded. I talked to the Secretary of Navy by even though they've had trouble, they just put their requirement to what they said they need. If they miss it, they miss it. The Army missed its requirements and therefore has done a couple of things to try to bring people in, like setting up something where young people who don't make the minimum can apply, be tested, go to a sort of 3-week or 3-month skills course and reapply and maybe make it. But also the Army reduced its requirement so that it wasn't getting the bad publicity of failing on its recruiting mission. I think we're at a real watershed moment in American military history and geopolitically. We need a larger force. It's that simple. We're not going to be able to recruit that force. We haven't funded that force, and we're breaking the back of the existing force by repetitive deployments. We've got units deploying that are not fully manned. We've got units that are deploying with people that just came back from another deployment with another unit. We've got ships going out there that are not fully manned. I think the Marines always get some people who are gung-ho, want to fight. The Air Force is where people go because they don't want to be on a ship or in a foxhole traditionally, and the parents think it's easier. but in reality, we don't have enough people. And this is a population roughly twice of what it was when we had the draft. So how can this be, and what should we do? So first of all, I think we need to go back and relook the incentives. A lot of the incentives we had for the volunteer force have been taken up already. College, VA benefits, that's been spread across the whole US government. Education, spread across the government. And at the same time, we've watered down the benefits of active service. You don't get your 50% retirement in 50 years. You don't get lifetime medical care. You're going to pay for it. And so there's been a leveling, and this is not good for recruiting. But more fundamentally, I don't think you can buy the armed forces you need. I think you have to go back to a concept of national service, not just public service. That's important. Not just national service, but military service. I think it starts with the President of the United States. I think the president has to extol the virtues of the military organization. And I'm not going to say that that's going to be easy for any president to do, especially when they haven't served. But that's the sort of liftoff that we need. And then I think we need to have some special cases. During the Vietnam War, we had a special draft for doctors. So I remember when I was in the hospital in Pennsylvania, my hand surgeon was one of the finest hand surgeons from New York City. And he was probably giving up hundreds of thousands of dollars, but he was an Army major, and he was there at Valley Forge Hospital. So we don't have that facility right now actively working, but we should. And with modern data processing, and we've already sort of warmed up the Selective Service Act, as I understand it. We need to be able to have augmentees that can be called on, in particular in critical skill sets, medicine for sure, but also things like cyber, crypto. Those people are there. They need to be brought in on an as-needed basis, but they need to be registered and prepared in peacetime. And they need to understand, if we need you, we're going to call you. And we need to set up that kind of a program. If there's a national emergency, we'll get the infantrymen we need, but we won't get the skilled personnel we need necessarily. So we need that augmentation to stand by. And then we need a larger force structure. I know I'm just whistling in the wind here. I know, Congress won't do it, blah, 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 blah. But Senator Roger Wicker published a study that I had the pleasure of commenting on about 6 months ago. And he calls for the defense budget, the top line, to go from 2.9% up to what it was during the Cold War, 4.5%. If we do that, we can afford the force structure we need. And we just don't have it right now. And it's going to be those of us who are concerned about national security, it's up to us to speak out for it, because otherwise it will always lose in the OMB competition. But look, we did this during the Cold War. We put 5% into national security and defense. We can put 4% in right now. We don't have to go to 2.9%. So I think if you look at the geopolitical situation, we're due, and we need a larger structure of forces.